I've grown up with Star Wars all my life. I think like many people out there, you can definitely relate to this. If you're someone who started with the originals, or if you're someone like me who grew up with the prequels and the originals, and then realised the great pinnacle of Star Wars being the Clone Wars TV show. I love everything that the show ended up adding, but some of my favourite episodes within that were everything to do with Darth Maul's storyline and how much more they fleshed out around the idea of the Mandalorians. But when episode 8 came out, we had a disturbance in the Force. Mainly all of the plot holes and all of the issues that came around because of the sequels, and the way that they weren't actually enacted in a cohesive manner to create a story that made sense for everyone involved, even the directors. When the sequels were finished, we had a few different questions, outside of, the idea of what have we just watched, and how has this actually happened. We ended up thinking about how is Palpatine ended up returning, and why. So this is where The Mandalorian comes into it. We have a show that for the first time in ages is a return truly to what Star Wars is meant to feel like. From the moment Disney bought the rights, we've ended up at a point where we've got 9 seasons spanning across 7 different shows, and we've had 5 movies. However, all of this has come over the course of 11 years, with most of it though coming out in more recent years. But this means collectively, from a company the size of Disney, they've released very little over 11 years. Which is quite a surprise, which I think many Star Wars fans have spoken about, even including like within the gaming genre, that they're starting to actually try and push more content into as well. But I think where most of the sticky waters come in is purely due to Disney+. The Mandalorian wasn't the first season to air under Disney's ownership of Star Wars, but in fact we ended up getting the last season of the Clone Wars first, which finally got released. It was looking great. We had season 7 of the Clone Wars, which went into episode 3, and then the release of the first season of The Mandalorian, which was an absolute hit. Then the Disney money printer got a little bit greedy with the amount of movies across all of their brands and shows that they were trying to release under Disney+. But that is totally for a different video, so if you are interested in that, let me know. Now, The Mandalorian was made to kind of fill 2 different holes. One of which was to fill the current state of Star Wars by that point. By the time March 2020 rolled around, we had one last great season of an animated show, one genuinely good Star Wars movie with Rogue One, and a decent beginning to the sequels with Force Awakens. However, there was a line where the decent films ends, and then we got given 3 somewhat terrible films. So it's there to fill the hole of what the franchise was at this point, which was looking as if it was about to be completely in the bin, and then also to fix the plot issues of the sequels. Which brings me to why The Mandalorian actually exists. I love The Mandalorian as much as the average fan, however, one of the things that has always annoyed me is that the only reason why this show exists is to fix mistakes of the sequels. That is it. With the primary plot being around the requirement and importance of Grogu and his powers, and utilising it in a way, to clone Palpatine. That whole idea and why he's got so many clones and Snoke is a clone and all these different things, like everything around that entire idea. And then also, Grogu being made as a way for Disney to make money, because Disney are a merch company above everything else. Now, it is in a way a weird blessing that came from a disaster. However, this is why I love and hate The Mandalorian in a way. I love the show because it feels like a Star Wars show and it feels like a Star Wars environment that continued on what we learned from the Clone Wars. But I also hate the reason why the show is in existence in the first place. And like I said, to just fix the issues of the sequels and to fix the factor that Star Wars was in such a bad place to begin with. It's kind of like how there was kind of no other way but up by this point after the sequels had come out, and then also like the Solo film not being that great. So a mixture of all of these things ended up creating this just vapid pit of just useless Star Wars content, and then they were like, okay, we really need to get this one right. Right now we're in this weird era of Star Wars and Disney as well, where we are hoping to get some hits, but for the most part we're just getting a load of misses right now. I'll be making a future video, probably talking about more of the future things to do with Star Wars and kind of the more up-to-date content surrounding Star Wars with the shows, and then the whole idea of the fact that we might be getting, I believe we're getting the sequel to the sequels, so we're going to be getting like an episode 10 at some point, an entire trilogy again around Rey, I believe, something along those lines, and then also also the possibility of like an Old Republic-esque film, which will all be interesting. I'll definitely make content around it in the future. But yeah, I thought I'd just make a video discussing why I kind of had this weird mixed like love-hate relationship with The Mandalorian. I think it's a great show. I think it feels like Star Wars. In a way, I also feel as if at times with all of the Star Wars shows, I don't know how else to describe it, but it always feels like a fan depicted show in the sense of like it never feels fully like Hollywood, I guess, like in terms of most things. Like if you take the Obi-Wan show, for example, a lot of that felt very fan-made-esque, where like it doesn't feel as if the camera angles were on point for a lot of it. And I don't know, it always gives me this weird feeling, especially when you see them walking around in the Mandalorian suits. All I imagine is like literally people in real life going to like conventions wearing them. I don't know. It's just me. But yeah, overall, I'll be definitely interested to see what happens in the future. But yeah, I just always have this weird, there's always the bitter taste at the back of my throat when it comes to The Mandalorian, just because the only reason why it exists is to fix issues they needed to get it right. Otherwise, they knew they were screwed. But yeah, overall, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, do subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.